Hello, everybody. Welcome to the No BS Zone. I'm Bernie Goldberg with my good friend, the Renaissance man of the Rockies, John Daly. John, you doing okay today?
I'm doing all right. How about you, Bernie?
I'm good. Let's get right to it. The big story in the news is a Washington Post story, which you probably know about by now, where Pete Hegseth is alleged to have said, "Kill them all," referring to people in a boat that had been blown up by the United States, a supposed drug-carrying boat in the Caribbean. Let's leave aside, for the sake of this discussion, whether blowing up boats in the Caribbean is legal to begin with. Let's be gracious and call it a gray area. But if Hegseth ordered a second strike on people who were still alive, a couple of people who were still alive and clinging to the remains of the boat, that is clearly not legal. Clearly not legal. And it's a good thing that Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, are concerned enough about this that they're looking into it. There's already indications that Hegseth and the commander-in-chief, President Trump, are shifting. Hegseth, let me state importantly, Hegseth denies the allegation. He says it's fake news. Whether it is or not, we'll find out in due time. But it looks like they're already shifting the blame, if there's blame to be had, on the military leader who, well, he was following all the legal orders. He did everything right. The question is, did Pete Hegseth say it or didn't he say it? And if he did say it, he's finished, I think. I don't see how he can possibly keep his job if it turns out that Congress has enough evidence that he said kill them all, referring to the people in the water clinging to the boat. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it is worth at least going back a little bit to the broader actions here, because I think the whole thing with blowing drug boats out of the water, there was a lot of indication that was probably illegal in the first place. But as I think I mentioned back in October when we talked about this, there's this legal loophole that some refer as the golden shield that would probably, if this isn't legal, it would probably protect Trump and members of his administration, because they were able to get somebody over at the state, the DOJ Office of Legal Counsel, to write an opinion that they thought it was legal. So it's sort of a weird thing. I do not think that would work as a defense in this particular situation. As you say, going back and killing people who survived one of these boat strikes and were clinging to the remains of a boat is pretty well established as a war crime, and has been for quite a while. There are examples of this very type of thing happening during World War II. And the White House, as you said, Hegseth originally came out and said, this is fake news. But then they've had to sort of really backtrack on that. They finally confirmed that at least the events happened, not so much, what was said behind the scenes, but that, there was this initial strike. These two people were killed later on as they were clinging to the boat. I think, these revelations that they've had to sort of concede to, I think they actually explain a number of things, including why this operation, this whole thing with the boats, has been kept largely secret from Congress, which is not usually how it works. It would explain how another admiral who was in charge of this operation, was partially involved in this operation, ended up resigning, after this stuff came forward. I think it might even explain, Bernie, why those 6 Democratic senators made that video about the soldiers
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you got to wonder about that. Did they know that this Washington Post story was coming?
Yeah, you kind of cut out there for a second, Bernie, but I think that I think they might have heard something about what happened. Maybe not, from the Post or whatever, but I think they probably had an idea of sort of some of the events, and I wouldn't be surprised if that compelled them to make that video.
Well, what makes me, a couple of things. One, the source for the Washington Post story is unnamed.
Right.
Never comfortable with that, but I understand why somebody wouldn't go on the record. It could be somebody who doesn't like Pete Hegseth and wants him fired. We don't know. So the jury is still out on this. But you bring up an interesting point about that video that the 6 former members of the military or the CIA made. They make a video based on what? There was no reason to make that video. There was no indication that any laws had been broken or were in question. And then all of a sudden, a few days after they make the video, we get a report from the Washington Post that Pete Hegseth said, kill them all. If this is one of those alliances between the mainstream media who serves as a megaphone for the Democratic Party, I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. And it has a suspicious ring to it. I'm not making any allegations, not making any charges against the 6 congressmen, members of Congress, but the coincidence, the timing is awfully interesting.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know if it would be a sort of conversations between, Democrats and the media, which I'm sure do happen all the time. But yeah, I just they're kind of coming out. I've seen a few reports now that the general actions on September 2nd is when this happened, this particular boat strike with these survivors was sort of reported by some outlets a while back, even in September, and they didn't really get a lot of attention until more recently, and when the Post reported on what Hegseth allegedly said. So my guess is that they may have heard this not from the media, but from other people in Congress other people in the government. But who knows? But we are going to learn more. There's a lot of things we don't know right now, but I did think it was funny. And we're recording this on Tuesday. So last night, Monday, Hegseth did tweet that I felt like he did sort of throw the admiral under the bus a little bit. He said that, this admiral has their support, but he also kind of pointed out, well, this is the guy that made the call here, not me. So I thought that was sort of interesting.
Now, I mentioned earlier, John, that if true, Hegseth would be gone. And I'm not sure you agree with that, but if he is gone, he would resign so that Trump didn't have to fire him. What do you think about that part? And then we'll move on after this.
Yeah, I mean, if this was his responsibility, regardless of what specifically was said, I think there's some confusion there. He should go. I mean, he was never qualified to hold that position in the first place. I mean, everybody recognized it.
True. Absolutely right.
Right. But I also see, if he does get charged over this, and again, we'll see, and there's actually talk whether it would be a war crime, since, we're not exactly at war with these drug dealers, even though the administration likes to present it as such. So if there was a crime, it would be either, this war crime or murder. And war crime would actually be worse, I think, for sentencing. But I also think if he is charged, probably even if this admiral is charged, I also can see Donald Trump very easily giving them a pardon, so they don't get in trouble that way. They might not be in their positions anymore, but I think he'd be more than happy to pardon, people for these crimes. A lot of people forget this. In his first term, he actually pardoned a number of U.S. war criminals, and so this wouldn't even be that new of something if he were to do that.
No, before we move on, let me just one last sentence. Nothing surprises me that comes out of this administration anymore. Nothing surprises me. All right, let's move on to Ukraine. Every day, more and more of Ukraine turns into rubble. Forgive me for stating the obvious. Russia is clearly the villain. Ukraine is clearly the victim. But sometimes the bad guy loses.
Or wins, you mean?
Say that again?
Sometimes the bad guy wins. You said loses.
Yeah, sometimes the bad guy wins. I'm sorry. Thank you for catching that. Sometimes the bad guy wins. And I think that's the case here. In my view, Ukraine can never win this war, and Russia can never afford to lose the war. I'm not saying Russia would win the war. I'm not saying they're making progress, but they can't afford to lose the war. Both sides are enduring major casualties, but Russia simply can't turn around and leave. Now the president comes up with this 28-point program, peace plan, which looks like and may have been written by Vladimir Putin himself. The president is clearly throwing Ukraine under the bus because he knows he can push Vladimir Zelenskyy around, and he knows that he can't push Vladimir Putin around. Zelenskyy has made an eloquent and very sad observation that he has to make a decision, either lose the U.S. support or lose Ukraine's dignity. I don't know what he's going to do. I do know this. I do know that this is, I don't believe for a second that Trump is losing sleep over casualties in the Ukraine. I think this is about Trump wanting to take credit for ending a war and getting the Nobel freaking Peace Prize. That is what this is about when all is said and done. But what do you think, John? What do you think Zelenskyy will do, and what do you think he should do?
Well, I will say you mentioned something there real quick that Trump can't push Putin around. I totally think he can. I think we have a lot of leverage to push him around in many ways. He's just choosing not to for reasons that go back to his affection for Putin. They go back to his belief that, Russia is the stronger force and he doesn't want to be on the wrong side of this strength contest.
Let me just jump in. If I said can't, I didn't mean can't in the literal sense of the word. What I meant is he won't do it because he knows he can't push Putin around. He's afraid of Putin. He knows Putin will stand up to him and Putin will do whatever he wants. And Trump doesn't want to look like he's pushing Putin and getting nothing in return. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. He doesn't. He knows that. I mean, Putin has ignored him many times. Trump has thrown out all these threats in the past few months, and Putin doesn't care. He just keeps doing what he wants.
He literally rolled out a red carpet for him and got nothing in return.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So it's in my view, we talked about Trump possibly pulling U.S. support and all of this. It is. I think it is better not just for Ukraine, but also for Europe and the rest of the free world, including the United States, for that matter, for Zelenskyy to lose Donald Trump's support than entirely surrender to Vladimir Putin. And I think Putin will not be satisfied until all of Ukraine is under Russian control. And even then, I don't think he'll be satisfied. I think other countries will be next on his list.
I think you're onto something very important there.
Yeah, no, and Trump, I don't think he understands this or he doesn't care about it. Probably both, to be honest. We know, like I said, he has this affection for Putin, and that's not gonna change apparently, regardless of what Putin does. We know that J.D. Vance doesn't care about Ukraine because he's outright said so. We know by Steve Witkoff, his actions and all this, that he doesn't care.
They just want this to end so they can take credit for it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and it doesn't matter. Well, so Zelenskyy, he does understand the stakes. He understands that if there's any sort of, this 28-part plan was just ridiculous, as you said. I mean, parts of it looks like it was literally translated from Russian into English, and it was.
I think it might have been.
I agree. Not necessarily by Putin, but definitely someone under Putin. And there was, the story of this representative of Russia who had drinks. I think it was actually in Miami, drinks with Witkoff and Kushner and all these guys that came up with this. And it really was a Russian, wish list. And I think, the good news, I think Marco Rubio gets the stakes here. I think a number of Republicans in Congress get it, but, Trump doesn't. And if Ukraine, even if Trump would be fine getting a weak, ceasefire deal that basically just allows Russia to build up arms again, get ready to take the rest of Ukraine, because that's what would happen next. There might be a drawdown in troops just long enough to re-weaponize. But yeah, these are big stakes, and Trump doesn't get it. He doesn't care. A lot of the people around him don't care. Some are trying to work business deals with Russia for Trump's family and friends as part of these negotiation tactics. It's not a good situation.
I think what Trump does understand, and I'm not giving him credit for this, but I think what he does understand is that Ukraine can't win. To use Trump's terms, Zelenskyy doesn't have cards. He doesn't have enough cards in the deck to win. Zelenskyy, on the other hand, talks about the dignity of his country, and he may not surrender. But I'm going to go back to the very first words that I said in this segment. Every day, a little more of Ukraine turns to rubble. And that's a very, very sad thing to see. And Ukraine may have to accept a very, very bad deal in order to save what it has. But that's up to Ukraine, and it shouldn't be up to Donald Trump. And it sure as hell shouldn't be up to Vladimir Putin. All right, let's move on to the last topic here. Sure. Trump's poll numbers. Gallup poll, reputable polling company, as we all know. I'm going to read you this from The Hill. President Trump's approval rating reached its lowest point in 10 months into his second term and the lowest since he left office in 2021. He's got a 36% approval rating according to Gallup and a 60% disapproval rating. He's underwater in all sorts of categories. This has major, major implications for the midterms. I mean, a lot can change in the next 11 months, and a lot will change. But if things don't change, the Republicans are going to get shellacked, to use Obama's word, when the Democrats got shellacked. Now, here's what I want to go with this segment. President Trump is soon going to become a lame duck. His presidency, if they lose the House, is effectively over. My question for you, John, and everybody listening to us actually, what should we expect from Donald Trump at that point when he realizes it's over? Are we going to get more executive orders? I don't think he's going to slink away. I believe he's going to be angry and lash out and blame everything on Biden and the media, the fake news media and all that. And there's a possibility, and it's not a crazy possibility, but the Democrats may actually try to impeach him again. Where do you think this is going in the near future, John, if his poll numbers don't get better? And they may get better. They may get better.
Well, yeah, and it's possible. I mean, the primary reason millions of Americans decided to take their chances with Trump this second time wasn't because of how amazing he is. It's because they were sick of how much things cost under Biden. I mean, there were other contributing factors, but that was the big one, the big issue. And upon returning to office, Trump decided he was going to keep prices high and drive them even higher, because that's what tariffs do, and that's what he did. And it's until he has repealed some of those tariffs, and prices on certain items would come down. So if he did all of that, if he did that more, yeah, I could see the situation looking better and his poll numbers going back up. But for now, I keep saying this, Bernie, but I haven't seen, this is going to the lame duck point, I haven't seen any compelling evidence again that Donald Trump cares about Congress or Republicans holding a majority. I know he should. I totally get that. And I'm sure he would prefer that.
I'll tell you why he should. Because if the Democrats take over, he isn't getting anything through Congress. Nothing.
True, but it's at the same time, he doesn't really have a legislative agenda. I mean, I don't think he really cares about this legislation stuff. I think in part of him actually, like in the first term too, liked having Democrats as his foil, as having more power, so he can blame them on things that aren't working. It's a little harder to do that with the Republican Congress, but yeah, I do think he'll continue his executive actions. I think for him, I think he was sort of, so my theory, and I've said this many times, I think Trump ran for president last year basically to escape the big legal trouble that he was in, and it worked. He did. And that mission is accomplished. So now I think he's mostly just doing stuff he thinks is kind of cool and thinks is fun, like going after the people he doesn't like, central planning parts of the U.S. economy, putting himself between, the trade deals, putting the thumbs to people to get them to at least cough up performatively some concessions for him.
Do you think he gets impeached?
What's that?
Do you think he cares if he gets impeached?
You know what? I don't. I think he would prefer he's not, but it's already happened twice. he knows it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, if
my favorite line in any song in the past 50 years, Chris Christopherson's "Me and Bobby McGee," freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. If Donald Trump feels free, he's got nothing to lose. He won't care about anything. You're right. He'll do whatever he wants. He'll say whatever he wants. And the fact that he doesn't have a Republican Congress, or at least a House, you're right. It won't matter to him.
No, and I think that we'll see. You know, I mentioned we talked about pardons earlier. I think on his way out the door, Trump will grant himself a pardon for everything. You know, whether it's crimes to be charged later on, any of that stuff. So yeah, I don't think there's really a lot of accountability for him. You know, he's, like you said, he's done most of his first term through executive order. He's just doing things he wants to do right now. It doesn't even seem he's paying a lot of attention to what, you know, some of his big cabinet members have been doing. You know, reporters will ask him from time to time about, you know, his thoughts on what RFK has done or what somebody else has done, and he doesn't seem to have any idea what they're talking about. And just kind of, oh, I didn't know about that, you know. And I sort of believe him on that. I don't think he's really paying attention to this stuff. He's just enjoying this executive privilege that he has, and that's about the extent of it.
Which gives Democrats and the media plenty of reason to question his mental stability, something they didn't do for Joe Biden, but they're doing for Donald. And I'll tell you, this MRI, I don't want to get in detail on this, but this MRI that he just recently had, and we just learned about, an abdominal MRI, something's not right about that. Who gets a preventative MRI? I've never heard of that. And I'm not the only one who never heard of that. There was a doctor on CNN who said this is laughable that he had a preventative MRI. Anyway, you'll ask
on that a little bit. There is such a thing as that, and it has to do, but it usually has to do with certain types of patients and that thing. But yeah, it's MRIs. I don't know. That story, there may be something to it. I might, during the last few years of my father's life, he passed away earlier this year. He was getting MRIs all the time, just as it was almost like a standard procedure for certain symptoms that weren't even that particularly serious with him. So I'm not as attached to this MRI stuff as some of the people are fixated on it, but you know, it's worth knowing what it was for and why it was ordered. Trump himself doesn't seem to know why it was ordered, which I don't know if that's true or not. But this isn't as big of a deal to me.
We all hope that he's well.
Right. Absolutely.
Maybe not some hard left Democrats, but most of us hope that he's well. Tempted to say that's it for today. Is there anything else on your mind, John?
No, not really. It'll be interesting. You know, the Ukraine stuff we talked about quite a bit, but it is pretty worrisome where that's going right now. I'm curious. One of the things that sticks out to me was Steve Witkoff, where it came out that he was sort of coaching his Russian counterparts on how to kind of screw Ukraine over. So stuff like that is I think we're gonna want to see where that goes. I feel like there's a lot of people, a lot of bad actors in the second Trump term.
I hope I'm not being cynical, but I don't think Trump cares about Ukraine, or at least I don't think he cares about Ukraine as much as he cares about this thing ending, so that he might get a Nobel Peace Prize. Anyway, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I hope there wasn't too much, if any at all, talk about politics. I hope nobody got into fights about I love Donald Trump and I hate Donald Trump. Anyway, life is more important than arguing over stuff like that. Anyway, for this week, for this edition of the No BS Zone, and for my friend John Daly, we'll see you next time.